Great. Hello again and welcome to this webinar about fundraising trends 2022. I'm really excited that so many of you joined today for our free webinar about what you can do and should do in 2022 to keep fundraising successfully. So that's a great outlook. My name is Eva, and I will be your trainer today. We have members of our team in the chat as well. So if you have any questions, anything not working, etc., you can always type those questions into the chat and we will see. As you saw, this is being recorded because we want to share it afterwards. So just for your information. And I think we can get started right away with the presentation. After the presentation, we have some time for questions. So if you want to ask anything, if you have any specific questions, you can type them into the chat box and my team will collect them. And then in the end, we will have some time for a discussion. I will go through the questions and see what I can tell you. Okay, I hope you can all see my screen now and the presentation. Great, thank you. So today we're going to talk about the future of fundraising planning for 2022. So it's mainly going to be about some trends that we see in the field of philanthropy or fundraising that will be helpful for you to keep in mind when you plan your fundraising. Maybe you already have, but maybe there's some stuff you can include in your strategy. We'll talk a little bit about what will be important, what you should look out for, and what new-ish actors are that you can see on the market and how you can actually work with them. Oops. So my name is Eva. I'm from Germany, and I have worked with Philantropia for a couple of years already. I've lived and worked in Nepal for 7 years and done a lot of classroom training there. And since 2018, we've started an online training platform. So we have developed many online courses, webinars, etc. And since COVID has hit, obviously even more. So since then, I have become an online trainer, and I've also fundraised for many small and bigger organizations in Asia, South America, and Europe. And since I came back to Germany in 2019, I have started my own consulting company here as well. So I have a lot of experience working with donors and NGOs of all different sizes and different forms. So today we will talk about 4 topics, and this is going to be funding growth. So what does the trend show us? Obviously, we don't have data from 2021 and 22 because that's too recent. Obviously, 22 is happening right now. But we found a lot of data from the last years to see where the fundraising trends are going, how much money is available. Then we're going to talk about new opportunities, things that are coming up that might be worth considering and looking into. Then the startup model, so a different kind of model to approach fundraising and philanthropy. And in the end, we'll talk about competition and what that means for you and how you can actually still shine even with that much competition that is out there. So module 1, we're going to talk about funding growth. So what is happening out there, how much money is actually available? Because sometimes when we talk to people, to other fundraisers, we just feel like, there's no money available. It's more difficult and more difficult. But in reality, when we look at the numbers, actually there is more money available because people still donate a lot. There's a lot of foundations that work and give a lot of money. So there is opportunity and there actually is funding growth in many countries. So we're going to look at the numbers first. So if you look at total giving in the US, you see that it has been steadily growing since 2013. So last numbers we have is 2020. Maybe you will say, well, COVID, etc. 2020, we already had the crisis, so we've included that number, and it was still growing. And to be honest, in this number, individual giving is included, and many people actually did give more during this time of crisis, because particularly in the US, people got the stimulus check, they got a lot of money, so they actually donated because they couldn't spend it going out because everything was closed, they couldn't go for dinner, etc. So people had money left over. There was not the big crisis that we anticipated in the beginning. And people actually did have some resources and did and ended up giving more because they saw that there are causes that need support. So here in those numbers, you see in 2020, it was almost 500 billion US dollars that was given in the US. Again, this is a combined individual giving, foundations, corporate, etc. But it still is a very, very high number, and it's still growing. So the trend goes upwards here, which I think is a little bit different than what we sometimes think when we talk to other fundraisers or when we work in the field. Now we look at the total giving by US foundations, and it's a similar picture. So it has been going up more or less steadily since 2007. And in 2020, it was also around 90 billion. So a lot of money was given by US foundations. Especially in Germany, and I think that's worldwide the case, foundations have the problem at the moment that the interest rates are very, very low. So usually how foundations work is that they have a big chunk of money that was donated by the founder of the foundation, and then they invest that money and they spend the interest on projects and on their costs, etc. So now with the interest rates being very, very low, some foundations have problems there because they just don't have that much money to spend anymore. But they are still able to work against that. In the US, the tax laws are a little bit different as well, so that they actually do have to spend some part of the money that they had invested. So you see it's still going up. I think in European countries, it is a little bit different because they are actually not allowed to spend money from their core investment. So there have been some issues, but still payments by foundations are still very high. Obviously, you have to look at what it is spent for. There's a very high priority on projects with children, also faith-based projects, particularly in the US, have a very high priority on the donors list, but still there is money available. So if you look at the details, so giving data by donor type for 2020, you see that most of it, almost 70%, came from individual donors. So that is also a number that you should not discard easily. They give a lot. Obviously, a lot of that money stays in the US. So it's for local causes, it's for faith-based causes, so something to do with the church projects, etc. But still, people give a lot of money. Then you have foundations, which is around 20%. And it's still a big chunk of money that they spend. And foundations actually give much more money internationally. So up to 20% of that money is spent on international projects. So that is probably the chunk of money that is interesting for you if you work in different countries. Bequests means that when people, when they get old, they write their will and they actually give money to charity. That's meant by bequests. That has also been growing because the society in the US, but also particularly in Europe, is getting older and older. So this is a field that will constantly grow. More and more people have some amount of wealth and are not going to live forever. Obviously, the boomer generations are getting older, etc. So there is a lot of money owned by people who don't necessarily want to give it to their children because they have made their own fortunes. So they're thinking about giving it to charity. So this is a field that is actually growing very quickly, particularly in Europe, in countries like Germany, where we have a very, very old society. And the only thing that really went down in 2020 immediately was corporate funding, which is also understandable because corporations had issues. Corporations, usually when they have a CSR program, they give the money that they kind of have left over. They're not going to give money to charity that they would need for their core operations. And in the time of crisis, many corporations had huge issues. especially in the hospitality business, etc., where everything closed down, people wouldn't go out, people wouldn't buy that much of particular things. But there are other companies that have grown like crazy during Corona. So, Amazon is just one example, but also other companies that work with software, work with computers, etc. So if you are looking into corporate fundraising, it is important for you to keep in mind for 2022 that it can be more difficult with some of the donors. For example, we used to work with Lufthansa a lot. They had a foundation that gave a lot of money. Obviously, that stopped completely because they just have to look to themselves now. Lufthansa is an airline company, and air travel just completely broke down. So they're not giving anything anymore. But now there are different actors entering this market, like software companies. Consulting companies that have grown a lot during this time. So if you are working with corporate donors, maybe you have to shift your focus in your research as well and just look at companies that have grown a lot during this time. So it will be interesting to see what the numbers for 21 and 22 will be if those companies that have reached some wealth are now redirecting, and then because of that numbers are growing up again or not. We will have to see how that works. But again, if you work with corporations, make sure that you target corporations that have had a good time during Corona, that have actually grown, and not those that have had issues like airlines, restaurants, hospitality, etc. So if we look at the details, like we said, 70% is individuals, and often that's religiously motivated. So that is probably money that is not going to be available to you if you work in a developing country or in another country and are looking to the US for funding. 16, or actually was around 18%, is from foundations. That's much more interesting. 9% is bequests, 5 corporations, that's going down. And 6% of the total funding from the US is international. And if you remember, it's almost 500 billion. So 6% of that is a lot of money. It is available. And again, if you look at foundations only, that percentage is much higher because they spend up to 20% internationally. So that is interesting for you, because then you could write a proposal and apply for that kind of money. Now, if we look at the UK, there are similar developments. Obviously, the UK is a bit tricky because of Brexit. Many things have changed. Also, because of the change in government, the priorities have changed. The spending in general has changed. But still, if you look at total giving, it's going up. Total giving always includes individual giving. And people are still very empathetic. People do give, and people give more. If you look at UK foundations, it's also going up, a little bit down in 2020, but not significantly. You can see they are spending more and more. Again, UK foundations have some issues now because the Brexit and UK leaving the EU, especially if you work in other European countries, there might be some problems. But you see that the money is available and that it is growing. There's more opportunities for NGOs to actually apply with foundations and with all those big organizations internationally even. So you see in the European Union only, there are 120,000 foundations. In the US, only the US, it's 150,000 foundations, which is a huge number. And they spend almost the same amount of money, which is on national projects as well, like regional projects, etc., but also international projects. So if you just look at the money, it is there, it is available, and it's still growing, which is good news. One issue, again, that all European countries particularly, but the US also have, is that individual giving is growing. So it looks good on paper, but in reality, we see that many donors, the number of donors is actually going down because, as I said, the generations that have accumulated some wealth are getting older. So they do give, but they give higher amounts. But younger generations don't necessarily grow back and start the same habit of charitable giving. So that's an issue that we have to address. So when you think of your fundraising strategy, if you do work with individual donors as well, for example, if you run crowdfunding campaigns or the likes, you also have to think of ways to attract younger donors and how you could engage with younger people to get them to send you money as well, to support you as well, even if they're not that used to it. Now, looking at ODA, the picture is a little bit different. ODA is the official development assistance, and that has not been going up so much. Also because many countries have obviously had problems dealing with Corona, because they had to pay out stimulus checks, they had to set up all these programs to save their own businesses, etc. So many countries are struggling. That's why the ODA, also because of political reasons, is going down. For example, in the UK, the numbers are going down also because of political decisions, because obviously the official development assistance is decided by whoever is in government, and if the people in government don't support those ideas, then those numbers will go down, etc. So it looks like foundation spending is growing, individual giving is growing, ODA not necessarily. So those projects that highly depend on official development assistance might look at cuts in the future, or at least not at the same rate of growth. And in the US, it's going up and down. The numbers also always due to natural catastrophes, to political decisions. Trump wasn't a big fan. He tried to change the spending a lot, and it's going up again. And also because of international crises now, with the Ukraine war coming up, that's going to grow again, because people are spending money there to support the people. So this always highly depends on the external situation. This is another example for political decisions. You see that the ODA budget for UK aid is going down because of political decisions, because the government doesn't want to spend that much. They also, obviously, in the UK had big issues dealing with the Corona crisis, had to spend a lot of money. So it's not available, maybe. It's needed elsewhere in the household. But those decisions sometimes don't have anything to do with the actual developments in the field, but this applies mostly to the official development assistance, and again, not so much to foundations and individuals, which is probably the source of money that most of you are using. And the European Commission actually is stepping in and spending a lot of money. So if you or your organization has the bandwidth and the capacity to apply for European Commission funding, I think now is the good time, because it took a long time until they actually figured out how to spend in the new period from 21 to 27. Still not everything is decided, but at least they released the budget, and there is, as you see, there's an increase of 100. There's a huge increase, and the budget will be 123 billion for the next period, and a lot of that money is going to be spent internationally as well. So there, we will actually do a little course on that soon, where you can learn how to read MIPS. Those are the strategy papers for every country. So if you look at that for your country and your project fits within the EU focus, then it's a very good idea to look out for those open calls, because it is complicated to apply for EU money, very complicated, and you need also for reporting, the requirements are high, but at the same time, there is a lot of money available, and it's a great source of support if you can access that. So the key takeaways from the first module would be in general, giving continues to grow. So we saw the numbers going up, except for ODA, but all other numbers are going up, but it's not evenly. So we also, if you want to go into more detail, you should look at the causes. So you will see not every cause gets the same amount of money. Some causes get more, some get less, etc. It's a bit tricky to see. Health, obviously, is getting a lot of attention now, but then it's only the new health issues. For example, if you work in HIV, their funding is dwindling. It's going away because people seem to think it's solved, which obviously isn't, but so it's much more difficult to get money funding for HIV projects. If you focus obviously on newer diseases like coronavirus or hygiene, etc., it's a bit easier. So you really have to see where the money is going. For that, obviously, you need market intelligence. So donor research really understanding, finding out everything about a potential donor, looking in detail what they fund, how they fund, etc., is going to be super important in the future to really find those donors that are a perfect fit for you. That feeds into donor mapping and matching. So you have to write down what you find out, you have to collect intelligence, you have to really understand the donor, and then only then send a proposal. And within your organization or even within your field, it's always great to share information, because it's going to be more difficult to keep the overview of all those donors, of all the opportunities. So the more you can share, the better. I have to see how the focus will shift. So now children and faith are still very high on the donor agenda, faith specifically in the countries that, for example, in the US. But will it stay like that? I think there will be a shift also towards health, also towards every project that has to do with the SDGs, because the deadline to achieve the SDGs is like coming up, and not much has been done, and people are stressing out, like the European Union as well. They want to achieve those goals. They're going to have a big push. So everything connected to the Sustainable Development Goals will get a lot of funding and a big push in the future. So we have to see the developments there. And there are some risks obviously coming up. So one idea is to diversify, to have different sources of income. As you see, if you relied only on ODA in the past, that could be tricky because there are cuts. It's always tricky because the cuts can also be political, like we've seen in the past, also with US cuts, etc., for projects that have been dealing with women's health, etc. So there are always risks to that. And if you only have one donor, so also to anticipate the risks that might be coming. There might be a recession, there might be shifting priorities. We have Brexit, COVID, now we have the war in Ukraine. It might make a lot of sense, if you can, to diversify and to get money from different sources and to work with different kinds of donors. So the next trend we want to talk about is new opportunities. Because the market is shifting. If you look back 20, 25 years, you had foundations in the developed countries, and then INGOs would write applications and then go into the countries. But what we see now is a huge shift. First of all, to there are more and more donors, foundations in developing countries or in transition countries that you should really take a look at, because often they have a much better understanding of the work you do. And then also there's like a decentralization of funding, or it's supposed to be. It's not implemented nicely everywhere, but it's the idea that more NGOs on the ground should get funding, and that the international NGOs should not have so much power anymore. That's the idea. In many cases, you can see the shift, and it makes a lot of sense to understand it and to see those new actors. So there is more international giving. Also individual giving internationally. You can also see in countries that maybe 20 years ago you wouldn't have thought that people would give to charity in those countries, like Indonesia, India. Now they do. There's a lot of money available in those countries, so it's not necessarily always the best idea to go abroad and look for funding, but sometimes you can look internally. And yeah, this international fundraising, international giving is becoming more and more important. Obviously, this is connected to the internet. As you can also see here in this graph, the giving is inspired by online information, by social media, by email. Obviously, for the different age groups, there are different things that they do like, but online fundraising is a constantly growing field. If you work with individual donors, you can't do without. This is how you connect. This is how they get their information. So this is a field that is growing. And especially if you want to branch out and reach new people, new donors, then you can't get around online fundraising. You see 31% of worldwide donors give to organizations located outside of the country of residence. So it's becoming much more international, much more intertwined. And again, overall giving grew, also international giving, individual giving internationally. And the online part of it grew even by 12%. And in Germany, if I look at the studies, we see that up to 60% of NGOs expect online donations, online fundraising to be their most important instrument within the next 3 or 4 years. So you see it's growing very quickly. And if you do want to work with individual donors, or even if you want to work with foundations, you cannot neglect the online side anymore, because everybody's going to look at your homepage. This is going to be such an important tool in the future that you can't go without. And obviously natural disasters are still a great pull. So things like, natural disasters or even human-made disasters like the war at the moment are always motivations to donate, to give money in kind, etc. And that motivates up to 41% of donors worldwide. So this is still going to be a great push. So this is the individual part, but there are also new ODA donors that have entered the playing field kind of in the last years, that have not been very present and not been very active before that. So we have the new EU member states like Croatia, Hungary, for example. They also start their own foreign offices, and they start their own line of work. So those countries that maybe 30, 40 years ago received support now can actually start giving support. So these are people that you have, or these are agencies that you have to keep in mind when you look to work with official development assistance. Then there are also large emerging market donors, like the BRICS countries, South Korea, Mexico, big countries that have their economy, that have a strong economy, and that also start giving, not necessarily through ODA, not necessarily through an office, but they are actors that you should not forget, that you should look at. And all these countries that are just coming up are going to be much more important actors in the future. And often they have a different approach towards projects. They don't have, because sometimes they understand better. Like a country like Mexico has dealt or is still dealing with many of the problems that many projects have that then apply for money from abroad. So there's going to be a different understanding and probably also a different approach that you should keep in mind. Then we have the Gulf donors, also relatively new actors. They spend a lot of money, but obviously there you also have to look closely if that's a partner that you would want. Often it's a very high investment, because Gulf donors, they spend a lot of money, but they also want a lot in return. They want often someone sitting in an office in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, being there as a spokesperson, etc. So it's a high investment, and as you see, it's not very easy for political reasons, etc. So sometimes maybe they are not the best partner, but they are actors, again, actors that you have to look at if you look for international funding. And then there are very new aid agencies like in Singapore, Israel, Chile, Turkey, Kazakhstan, that also all founded aid agencies, and that they have projects abroad that they just started. And again, maybe often they have a little bit of a different outlook, because they come from a different place than the traditional ODA countries like Germany, Holland, the UK, etc. Because those countries have gone through the process and maybe have a different understanding of development as well. Then we also have international foundations that have grown in those countries that you can ask for funding, especially if you work in the very same countries or areas. So many wealthy individuals from, for example, from India, from South American countries, from countries in East Africa, or any other region. There are many wealthy individuals, as you know. In India, there are some of the richest people in the world that have made fortunes. And many of them have started to give back in one way or another. And many of them have started foundations. So if you work in India, for example, Tata Trusts is one of the biggest foundations there is, and they do spend a lot of money on projects with, I think it's mostly children. So charitable projects that give very good publicity, make good pictures, etc. Safaricom is, I think, connected to a mobile phone company. There's a lot of money available there, and they do interesting projects. So when you start your donor research, I think this conception that we often have, that we immediately go look internationally. So if we think of foundation, the first thing we think of is Bill Gates Foundation or the Ford Foundation or MacArthur. Those ones obviously are big and they have a lot of opportunities, but there's also local foundations that have grown in the countries that you work in, or maybe in a neighboring country, that often also have a lot of funding available. And then often the chances are better if you can directly talk to, maybe you can visit the office, maybe it's you are close by, and also they will have a different understanding for your situation and for the issues that you deal with, because they come from the same place. And I think that is very important, because unfortunately in development cooperation, in funding, etc., you often still have this issue where things are decided in the developed countries by high ups in those INGOs, and then implemented in other countries by NGOs. But if you can work with a donor who comes from exactly the same place and has this different understanding of the needs and the issues that you are dealing with, you might get to a different agreement with that donor. Obviously not always, but often there's a better understanding for the situation in the field. Then we also have corporate giving in those new and upcoming countries. So for example, in India, there's legislation that companies have to give 2% to charitable giving. So there's a lot of money, because many companies in India make a lot of money. So there are new opportunities as well that you can reach out to. So if you are in India, Nigeria, Malaysia, etc., and you are trying to implement a project, it also makes sense to look to local regional companies, or companies that have offices, plants in your country, in your vicinity, to see if they can maybe support your project with corporate giving, because there is money available in those corporations. They do want to engage with the communities, etc. And if you look to them and ask them for support, often this can also end up in a very fruitful cooperation. So the key takeaways from the second part, I would say, are the market is growing also in non-traditional countries that you wouldn't think of as ODA countries if you just have to list them up in your head. Maybe the return on investment might be lower because maybe they don't have that much money available yet, but they can be good partners in the future. And so you have to see, but you also have to look at donors, at the new donors, and see if they would be a good long-term partner for you. For example, if there's any political issues that you would run into in the long term, or any ethical issues, or maybe they are not well organized, so maybe you would have to go through hoops, or maybe you would have to kind of work out something together with them. So you really have to see if it makes sense for you, if the investment makes sense, and if it's a good idea. Then again, we have those concepts of decentralized and localized funding. So what you want is donors to spend money in the field, in the countries that they want to work in. You don't want them to give money to some INGO and then they go out and do the next step, and then again another intermediary goes out. That's not a good idea, because there's a lot of money lost, and often the priorities are not addressed correctly. So we would hope that those non-traditional donors maybe also do this step and really do it the right way. I don't know if we can say that's the right way, but the better way at the moment. And then we have corporate social responsibility. Companies in those countries are flourishing in many cases and can be good partners. But again, you look at corporate fundraising, you really have to do your due diligence, because you don't want any company to use you just for greenwashing, or to use you just to better their reputation. The second point goes back to that. There's some reputational risks. Faith might be an issue sometimes if the donor countries have a different religion and maybe it doesn't work out. You have to really vet the donor, see, do you have the same goals? Do you really want to be associated with this donor? How can you develop a gift acceptance policy, etc. And the management might be more challenging because they might not have that much experience with like managing a project, evaluation, monitoring, etc. So you might need to spend some more time on that. So you should assign someone who's responsible if you're planning to do that. Again, you need donor intelligence, you need to find out what they want, how they want to do it, if it's worth it. And maybe you have to develop, and at least you have to be open for new ways of working with these new donors because they might approach things differently. Then we have the startup model, which is also very interesting, I think. This talks about a new approach towards development cooperation that some countries are using, some agencies are using, and they focus more on the impact. So instead of giving a grant, they call it impact investing. They are looking at the outcome of the project. What is the impact that the project has? And looking at it more in business terms instead of those terms that we have coined in the world of development and philanthropy in the last year. So instead of a proposal, you send them a pitch deck. The vocabulary is a little bit different, and it's kind of following along the history of some of those Silicon Valley companies that started very small and then grew very quickly. And here the idea is that instead of giving money for development projects, you invest in projects that that could change the life of people in the long term, but with an economic approach. So you start a social enterprise, you kind of get people to work with you, you change their lives from within. That's the idea. But if you really look at it, it's the same projects, because that's what most development work does anyways, because it's about supplying people the chance to kind of support themselves. So many development projects have this idea of starting a social enterprise anyways. They have this idea of supporting people so that they can develop economically anyways. It's just a very different vocabulary. So if you come across those donors, you just need to be aware of the different wording. They want things short, they want things quick, succinct, they want to be they want to understand it, they want to see what the impact will be. That's much more important. And I think the most important thing is that they don't have much time. They think like business people, so they want it to be quick. So for example, the classic thing that we see is a pitch deck. When people ask, they tell us, they approach us and say, oh, we've been asked to send them a pitch deck, here's our 30 slides. A pitch deck is 10 slides, something quick, something small, etc., that obviously has the important information, but isn't as inflated sometimes as a proposal. So that those are the main differences. You see those things in the foundations connected to these Silicon Valley companies. So for example, Google has google.org. They do fund some projects through this way. Then eBay, the founders of eBay have started the foundation Humanity United. Skype, the founders of Skype have started Zenstream Philanthropies. And when you talk there, you don't talk to a project manager, you talk to this, I think it's called impact officer or something like that. So it's different terminology. It's basically the same. You just have to adjust to it. And it's interesting to see if development projects that can become quite inflated and big and sometimes slow to change and slow to adjust, if they can be streamlined a bit to make them more efficient. So that's basically the idea behind that. And a lot of development, also ODA money and development cooperation, gets spent into those purely economic projects now. So investing in the economy of countries instead of paying for projects. It's a different approach. It will probably not completely supplant the other, but if you are working in this field, it might make sense to look into it. So the impact of Silicon Valley is important here. They call it venture philanthropy, and they focus on impact investing and metrics. So you have to give them numbers, you have to tell them exactly how those indicators are going to change and what the impact will be. They're looking for returns on their investment. Obviously, the language is different. If you want to apply with someone here, you have to look into the language, you have to try to understand it, and follow the way they want to see things. Then there's the idea of the NGO versus the social enterprise, but like I said,
I can't seem to hear. Is there a problem with the connection?
No, that was me. I was kicked out for a second, and then now I'm back, and I didn't open my mic again, but I hope you can hear me now.
Perfect. Yes, I can now. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm very sorry.
Okay.
I used to work in Nepal, and I always thought internet was bad there, but in Germany we have many issues with the internet, and it just got kicked out because the internet was gone for a second. So I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so NGOs versus social enterprise. I don't think this is exclusionary. I think many NGOs already do this, that they involve this idea of developing a concept of how NGOs can sustain themselves through a social enterprise in the long term. But yeah, those donors would like you to elaborate on those ideas. And yeah, the management, they're asking for a lean startup methodology. So not many people, like a very low structure, quick decisions, pitching ideas, and going through the motions in a little bit of a different way. And the last thing I want to talk about today is competition, because it's very important. Sometimes it can be intimidating to think about these numbers, but it is important because again, it tells you how important it is to do research correctly. Because we've talked about new chances, new opportunities a lot now, but obviously you are not the only ones trying to take advantage of these opportunities. There's many NGOs out there nowadays that try to take advantage and that have access to all this information. The internet is amazing because it gives opportunities to many people, but that also means that more and more people have find out about these opportunities. So the competition has grown immensely. So there's just a couple of numbers here. There's 63 million volunteers in America only every year that work. In India, we have 3.3 million NGOs, which is a crazy number. I think it's the most, in Nepal, numbers are very similar, very high, highest number. In the US, there's 1.5 million NGOs. So a very high number of organizations that are in one way or another competing for the funds that are available. So we've seen in the beginning, there is a lot of money available, but at the same time, the competition is also extremely high. Number of foundations obviously has grown, as we said before. In the European Union, we have around 120,000. In the US, 150. Even in Asia, what you might not think of as like a traditional donor, we have 50,000 foundations that might spend money. So what that means is there's just a lot of volume because there's a lot of opportunity, and at the same time there are so many NGOs, INGOs, even foundations sometimes that apply to that. So if you look at an organization like the Ford Foundation that had an open call for proposals constantly on their website 10 years ago, they had to stop that because they received so many proposals. So obviously this leads to many foundations making specific calls only instead of receiving, instead of being open to any kind of proposal. They are putting out calls that are more specific so that people actually only send their projects that really fit with the foundation. That is one thing that happens, but the other thing that happens is that you really need to send quality proposals. This is getting more and more important, that the proposals you send have to be a perfect fit for the donor, and they have to be really good. So this always speaks to the importance to learning, educating yourself, getting better at fundraising, getting better at proposal writing, because others are doing the same. Everybody has access to these courses, everybody has access to this information, and everybody's educating themselves. So if you want to be the one special project that gets chosen, you have to be great at every part of it. You have to have a good project, you have to get a good proposal, you have to do great networking, and you still have to have that little bit of luck that everybody needs. So it's getting more difficult. But the good news is you can learn about it, and you can actually develop ideas for that. As we said before, fundraising is becoming more international. That obviously also makes the competition higher, because if 20 years ago, maybe only 10, 20 foundations knew about this small grants program from a German foundation, now everybody can find out about it on the internet. So they might get applications from Brazil, from India, from Jordan, etc. So whatever you send, when you decide to send something, has to be great to really stick out. Obviously, you can use social media to connect with donors and to make connections that will help you to stick out. You can also connect with institutional donors. So you can also connect with foundations through social media. LinkedIn is a great tool where you can see who works at a specific foundation, maybe make connections before you send anything. And you really need to focus on gathering intelligence, donor intelligence. So you need to find out what the donors that you actually do want to work with want to fund. What are their priorities? How can you help them to achieve their goals? How does your project fit within their strategy, etc.? And then really show that. And this process is happens obviously online. You can search the internet. You can use databases to find potential donors. You can just ask around, use your own networks, and then in the next step, even before you send something, you have to network with the donor, get in touch, introduce yourself, and ask questions to even find out more about what they want to see. Because if you do all those steps, then you are already 10 steps ahead of 90% of the other applicants, and that's what you want to be. You want to have better chances of your proposal to go through. Building relationships and trust is extremely important, because the more applications foundations get, the more they kind of fall back onto people that they know, because if they've already worked with you, if they've already have some experience, then they will be more than happy to work with you again, or if you come with a good recommendation, etc. So building relationships and sustaining them in the long term, and building trust by good work, by being a good partner, is going to be very important. And this also comes with this last point, keeping donors informed, which is something NGOs tend to forget, that once the project is finished or once the grant is paid, they don't get in touch with the donor again. But you should always consider the donors that you've worked with as your partners. So keep them informed, keep them in the loop, make them friends, and then they will give you a recommendation. They will make sure that you will find more information, that you will find more potential partners that would be willing to fund you. So again, the key takeaways here: the volume is increasing, number of competitors, number of applications, but also the number of potential sources. So that means market intelligence and engagement with the donor is key. So you need to know who you're talking to, and they need to know you when you send them something. Quality is more important than ever, because with so much competition, your proposal has to be great. It is more difficult to stand out, because obviously the more competition there is, the more people have great ideas. And that might lead to the fact that small mistakes lead to no funding. So if you have one thing in the proposal that doesn't work out, there might be 10 others that don't have that mistake. So you really have to focus on detail. Your proposals have to have a high quality. And reputation plays into that as well. So those things are important to send a good picture of your work, of your NGO, your interests, etc. And it is important to have long-term planning, so that you know how you are going to fund your projects in the future. You have a plan lined out where you want to apply, where you get your money from, etc. But at the same time, the situation at the moment, or yeah, the longer moment, it's been more than a moment that we have COVID, shows that sometimes you need to adjust very quickly. Now we have a new war. Nobody knows what that will mean. So it means you have to adjust very quickly. So you have to have both sides. On the one hand, you need to do long-term planning, obviously, but on the other hand, you need to be able to adjust quickly and to pivot if needed. Yeah, with this, we come to the end of the presentation. I just want to refer again some of our online courses as well. As I said before, quality is more important than ever. And we have developed a lot of courses that actually teach about, for example, you see fundraising from US foundations, or how to write a project plan as a base for a proposal, which is a great way to start, how to raise funds from European foundations. We have courses about the Gulf donors, about writing a log frame, proposal writing, donor research, etc. So if you're interested, please check out our homepage, philantropia.org. And if you are interested in any of those courses with the coupon code PFN users, I think my team will also put that in the comment box, you can get 30% off on all of our courses. So if you're interested to learn more about any of these topics, please check out philantropia.org and use the code PFN users to get a 30% discount on any of the courses. We also have a couple of free courses. If you haven't taken those, they are always a good start about donor research, etc. So yeah, I just recommend you check out what we have to offer there. Yeah, now we still have time for some questions. I will. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Stop this and see in the chat if I can find questions quickly. I will start from the bottom. So the one question is, does one need some courses with you before qualifying for a grant? We are not a grant giving agency. We are a consultancy training company. So obviously you don't need to take one of those courses. They are courses that comprise the information that we have. Eric, my colleague, for example, he has worked for years and years with USAID. He has a lot of experience on how to write a proposal that works for USAID. So he shares his experience. So I would say that is very helpful, but obviously you don't need it because we are not the grant giving organization. We are just a consultancy training company to support you. Then I see a question from Sanjay, explain on donor intelligence. So donor intelligence basically means all kind of information about the donor. So if they are a good fit, if they fund in your country, if they fund the amount of money that you're looking for, if they fund the strategy you want to use, if they fund the activities you want to do, etc. This is called donor intelligence, prospect research, donor research, different kinds of names. If you want to learn more about that, we do have an online course specifically on donor research, but we also have a free course, which is called How to Find 50 donors in 10 minutes. I think that one is for free. And we explain how you can find really great donors in a short amount of time with some techniques that we have developed in the last years when we were doing donor research. Let me scroll through the questions. So one question from Rob is, you need funds to be able to fundraise. Are there funders that fund the first mile? Yeah, that is often an issue. That's true. And we recommend for the very first steps to get some experience to apply for small grants, because that's not so much work. So you don't need, like if you apply for a EU grant for European Commission funding, you need one person to do that, fully employed, and then you need one person to manage the grant once it's there. So yes, that is complicated. But if you start with smaller ones, you can, you don't need that much time, neither for the application nor for the management. You can also partner up with bigger NGOs to see if they can support you there. But yeah, it is a big issue that there is, that is so complicated and so expensive to, to really learn how to fundraise. And we see that issue as well. There are some donors that do have programs that kind of try to support that first step, but not many, and it's a big problem. So that's why we believe in creating these online courses for the lowest price we possibly can, so that many people at least can learn about it. And then obviously still have to spend the time to develop proposals, but that's the idea behind it. But yeah, that is a problem that we see as well, but unfortunately we don't have a real solution. Then Abu is asking any ideas on how local NGOs can, what they can do for self-funding. There are many things you can do. Often when I worked in Nepal, I worked with a small agroforestry NGO for a long time. So what we always did is we did have membership fees. They were very, very poor, but still they were able to pay a little membership fee. And because we had more than 100 members, that also added up to something. Then whenever we implemented a project, they had to pay a little fee to participate because they were able to come up with that fee. And for people who absolutely couldn't, we always found a way. But many people were able to come up with that little fee. And again, with 100 members, that added up to something. And then if you look locally or regionally, sometimes you can ask companies in your city, in your community, in the next regional bigger town, if they would like to support you, sometimes with products in kind, etc. And if you look at embassies in your country, for example, I know the German embassy and also the US embassy, they all have small grants programs that support local initiatives in the countries that the embassy is based in. Often it's very easy to apply to those programs because you don't need to make a big proposal. It's like a 2, 3, 4 pager, and it's easy to manage as well. So those, I think, are good sources for a first small grant, whatever, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, something like that. It's not big money, but you can often do a lot with that kind of money, no? So embassies are a very good source to start looking, that I would recommend.
Hey everyone, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So my name is Benayeko from Nigeria, and I am the programs officer of the Eco Carbon and Communities Exchange. So my question is, we've been having a hard time trying to get funding for our organization, because what we focus on is carbon audits, climate financing, and all of that. You mentioned in your slides that there are some organizations that focus on, that have key focus areas in maybe social needs and all of that. Do we have organizations that primarily focused on pushing what we do, climate finance? Do you have that in mind, or should we?
There surely are. I can't really come up with them at the top of my head, but I know that on proposals for NGOs, this is another homepage that we run, we do have articles specifically on climate finance and environmental projects, etc., because there are some big donors that are really interested in that. And I think it's going to get a bigger push now, because on the one hand, because of the SDGs as well, but also because, yeah, everybody is, it's becoming a priority because we can't look away anymore, and especially focusing on energy is going to be much more important in the future with the global situation at the moment. So if you want to, I don't know if Pretty can find it this quickly, maybe she can post the link to that one article at least. If you otherwise you can just check out on proposals4ngos.com. It's a different page where we have many articles, resources, free resources, sample proposals, etc., that you can check out. Maybe that will also be of help. This is also, maybe we can connect it to the question of Rob. Is there a donor database? Because there are different donor databases that you can use. We also run one. I think it's, I'm not going to tell you something wrong. I think it's donordatabase.org. My team will post the link in the comments trust them, don't trust me, because I might have it wrong right now. You have 1 week for free. This is also interesting for many of you. I think 1 week you can use it for free. After that, there's a fee. I think it's $200 per year or something. So it's one of the cheaper ones. But you can have a trial phase and see, and then look for example, environmental donors or climate finance donors or whatever you're working in, and see which foundations come up there. This obviously, this is not a perfect list. You still have to go to the homepage of the donor and check out, but it gives you some ideas already. So this is something we can recommend. Yeah, so many of you have asked for specific donors. So obviously I can't tell you for every topic. I don't have all of those donors in my mind. But again, the two things I would recommend, we have one free course, which is called How to Find 50 Donors in 10 Minutes. There we explain how you can actually find donors for your field. And if you want to try out the donor database, please do so as well. I think it's 1 week free. So there you can also find a list of donors, and then you can start with that and research them further. You see, I'm just scrolling up to see if there are more questions. Yeah, Joanne is asking if about the effect of the Ukraine war. Well, it's a very difficult question. I'm not sure, to be honest. I live in Germany, so we are very. I just before this webinar, I brought some, like a big box of donations to my daughter's school because they are collecting and bringing stuff to the border. We have to see what happens there. To be honest, I don't really know how this development will go. I mean, in general, people are usually very happy to give money to these humanitarian causes, especially when it's produces pictures like that. So we'll have to see what happens. Also about the global economy, here in Germany, I see the thing that we already see is that gas prices are sky high. So we have to see what that means again for other parts of industry, for other businesses in Germany, etc. So it's a bit too fresh for me to say anything about it, because it's a very difficult situation. But I don't think it will really have a lot of impact on the long-term development spending, because as we saw, ODA is going down anyways. I think foundations will not completely reshape their program. Individual giving maybe, but there are always catastrophes like that change individual giving. Like last year in Germany, we had a flood catastrophe. We had like many rivers were going, and some cities have been destroyed completely. So there was so many people giving to those causes, obviously, because there was a very strong connection, but that didn't mean that there was no money for anything else. People were still giving. So I don't think it's going to make huge changes there, but obviously it might have very, very big effects on the global economy if they really shut Russia off completely, if there's not going to be any oil from Russia anymore, or any gas, not the oil so much, it's the gas. There will be repercussions, but I think it's hard to say what they will be exactly. Let's see. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting lost in the questions. Do you provide training on how to write a winning proposal? Yes, we do. I think the link must be in there already. We also have like a book, a resource guide that you can get, I think, for $10 that has a lot of information on how to write great proposals. And for the courses, so how do I access the courses? Please share the steps. The question by David. We have a couple of links in the comments now. Otherwise, you can just go to philantropia.org, and there you get a link to the courses. You see the page with all of our courses. You can also find the free courses there, and click the course. It will take you to the Teachable platform, and then you just sign up with a profile. I think you will also get some follow-up emails after this webinar where we can also share the resources that we have. seminar on self-funding initiatives. We do have, I did do webinars on how to fund, how to get funding when your NGO is brand new. So for very small local initiatives. If you check our YouTube channel, you can also find, I think, the video of the webinar. It's been a while ago, last year sometime. But if you go to our YouTube channel, you can find many webinars that we did in the past about different topics that will also be interesting. And we also have a full course on getting funding as a brand new NGO, if that's interesting for you. The pros and cons in subscribing to Funds for NGOs, that's not us, so I can't really tell you much about that. They have a free net newsletter where you get many funding opportunities. So I think that is always very helpful if you sign up for that. Douglas is asking if we can highlight the qualities of a great proposal. That's a full webinar. So maybe you can sign up. We will do that again because that's one of the topics that keeps coming up. We have a couple of these webinars up on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested, you can check that out, or just sign up for the next one that we'll do about proposal writing again. I think maybe the most general thing I can tell you is think about what the donor wants. Really understand what the donor's mission is and how your project will help to achieve that mission, because that's what donors are looking for. They have their own mission and they are looking for partners to help them to achieve that mission. And maybe your proposal has to tell them exactly how that is going to happen in very, very simple terms. Okay, I think I went through most of them. So we do not offer like direct consulting services but we do offer all these courses. So we've decided some time ago that we'll go this way, trying to use the knowledge that we have for many people. So we've developed all these online courses, all these resources that you can check out for yourself. Okay. I think I got through most questions. So again, we do not, maybe that wasn't clear enough. So we do not offer direct consulting services. So we do not work one-on-one with NGOs. But if you check Philantropia.org and also proposals4ngos.com, you will find many, many resources that will be of great help. Okay. I think I'm also running out of time. Thank you so much, all of you who participated. This was a great session again. I hope to see all of you in one of our other courses again. So we have these webinars once a month around. And I hope you join us for the next one again. Join one of our free courses and keep on learning. I wish you all the best and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.